Hello friends, we continue the modules on global Shakespeare. The next two modules will have a conversation between Andrew Dixon, the theatre critic of The Guardian in England, Preeti Taneja, who studies at the Royal Holloway in England, and myself. We will talk about the Globe to Globe Festival that was held at the Globe Theatre in London in 2012. We will also talk about the importance of Shakespeare being translated into many different languages and how English is no longer an intrinsic part of the enjoyment that we get from the plays of Shakespeare. I hope you enjoy this conversation. Hello everyone, I have here with me Preeti Taneja, who is from the Royal Holloway, University of London. She is a visiting lecturer there as well as a PhD candidate in English and creative writing. And I also have here with me Andrew Dixon, who is the theatre editor for the Guardian newspaper and a visiting fellow at Birkbeck, London. Both Preeti and Andrew are here on the occasion of the international seminar Revisiting Shakespeare in Indian Literature and Culture, organized by the Shakespeare Society of India and IP College, University of Delhi. They have both very kindly agreed to have a little tete-a-tete for our ILLL site. Welcome Preeti, welcome Andrew. Now, you know, a sort of buzzword these days is global Shakespeare. Preeti, would you like to just sort of respond to this whole term global Shakespeare?
I think there's an idea that Shakespeare is universal and that there's something in the plays which speaks to people from all different cultures, from their position of what those plays actually mean to them in their context. And in the UK, the awareness of that has grown, especially with the recent Shakespeare and the Cultural Olympiad and the Globe to Globe Festival, which was on in 2012.
Andrew, what does global Shakespeare mean to you?
Many different things. I mean, it's been fascinating just being at the conference, even for just the past few days, hearing how many sides global Shakespeare has. You know, that I think there is, as Preeti says, this idea of a kind of universal Shakespeare. I think what's also really interesting is precisely as you describe those mixing and comminglings with local Shakespeares. Mm-hmm. And so even just hearing about the different kind of Shakespeares available in somewhere like India, in many languages, in an entire subcontinent, is being absolutely fascinating. And you know, I'm reminded again and again that there are thousands of Shakespeares, millions of Shakespeares. Mm-hmm. I suppose there are probably as many Shakespeares as there are people who go to the plays, perform them or read them.
Right. And would you say that both your opinions about global Shakespeare have been heightened or have been, you know, sort of reformed by this local, recent extravaganza in 2012? Both the performances as part of the Globe to Globe Festival and also as part of the Cultural Olympiad?
Well, I think it's important not to see global Shakespeare as something new, because whenever you go to a country that isn't the UK, you realise just how long people have been interacting with Shakespeare, interrogating Shakespeare and reforming it for their own purposes, their own cultural purposes and their own understandings. And they use it to investigate paradigms of behaviour in their own societies. They don't necessarily use it to understand Shakespeare. So that's something that I think has now come home to the audience in the UK. And we have to remember as well that that audience is incredibly multicultural as well. It isn't British and homogenous.
Yeah, I'd absolutely agree with that. I mean, I think what's been really striking watching a lot of the World Shakespeare Festival in the UK and elsewhere is how it sort of feels that particularly theatre performances have finally caught up with what academics have been talking about for years and years. And indeed, you know, I mean, in somewhere like India, I mean, this relationship goes back to the 18th century and has many, many different forms. I think it feels like in Britain, we haven't quite realised that for a long, long time. We've had our own sense of who Shakespeare is and who we want Shakespeare to be. The idea of Britain's national poet is still very strong, I think, in Britain. And I think what was so exciting about the Shakespeare Festival last year, the World Shakespeare Festival, was that it finally felt as if some of these things were being unsettled a bit. And people in Britain as you say, not homogenous, not one colour, not one creed, not one class, but at the same time that people had more of an awareness that Shakespeare is all of these different people in all of these different places, and that was a great realisation.
Andrew, in your presentation this morning, you made this very interesting comment about how the globe to globe, the parameters that they set up, that the performance had to be not in English, A, and B, that the Shakespeare text had to be followed, the plots had to be followed. So how did you come away from that globe to globe experience? Was your your attitude to Shakespeare changed as a result of seeing him performed in languages that you didn't necessarily know?
Yeah, absolutely. It was changed in several interesting ways. I think one thing is that the Globe to Globe Festival, because of the nature of it, most of these companies were only performing twice. So they literally would kind of fly in, get into the theatre, get on stage, do 2 performances and then kind of disappear again. I mean, the whole festival was over in 6 weeks. So there was very, very little time for kind of extensively, there wasn't much co-production in a sense. The companies were kind of told to prepare a play, turn up and do it. So there was, as it were, no interference, I think, from the kind of British co-production side. In contrast to other productions, say, for instance, done by the Royal Shakespeare Company, which were much more intensively involved. So there was something very unmediated about it, which I thought was really interesting. And the second thing was, because of these languages and the fact that the Globe didn't use surtitles, there were screens, but they were very, very basic next to the stage. I mean, as an English-speaking audience member, I suddenly felt quite estranged from Shakespeare, from this kind of Shakespeare, in a way that I found very, very liberating. What was also fantastic was that you saw audiences at the Globe, whether they were Gujarati speaking, Hindi speaking, Dari Persian speaking, who would not normally go to the Globe, would not normally go to those performances, and the research afterwards has proved that. So I think there was a real sense that actually people were encountering Shakespeare in a place that they probably wouldn't normally go to, and the notion of who Shakespeare this was totally revitalised.
Preeti, if you were seeing, say the 12th Night production in Hindi, because, you speak Hindi, you're of Indian heritage, would your attitude be any different from Andrew's? And if so, in what way?
I think my attitude would be different because I would have been part of the audience that understood all the jokes that were being made. And I have to say, wittily, some of those jokes were actually against people who couldn't speak Hindi, because they were jokes about translation, they were jokes about Shakespeare, they were jokes about being sahibs and being, enamoured of being able to speak English. And that was sort of mocked in a way, which only the Hindi speakers would have understood. So it was very cleverly done. And so from that point of view, along with the Hindi-speaking audience, I enjoyed that very much. And having that bilinguality and knowing that play, I think I could see it from a sort of more 360-degree view.
Talking about bilinguality and multilinguality, one of the little excerpts of Midsummer Night's Dream that we have up on the site is of the exchange between Hermia and Helena, performed in 4 or 5 different Indian languages. All the girls were performing their roles in their own mother tongue, so to speak. And they said that, and they also had to translate Shakespeare themselves. And they said that provided a kind of access to Shakespeare, actually translating him into Malayalam or into Sanskrit or into Nepalese. That sort of access was something that they'd never found, not in the classroom, not in an annotated text. So, Andrew, would you like to react to that?
I could do that. Maybe you'd be better equipped. I mean, I suppose I can offer a more general perspective, which is that I suppose that what's interesting about Shakespeare as well, because the text is, Shakespeare's text is nearly 400 years old, the notion of what understanding is, what comprehension is of Shakespeare's text isn't something that's sort of univocal and straightforward even for native English speakers, however you want to place or describe that. So actually it's interesting that I suppose a translation, if you speak that language, can offer a more direct contact than probably many English speakers would have, but I'll hand over to you on that.
I think when you talk to practitioners who have translated the text, they go about it in a number of different ways. You can either have someone sort of trying to say every single word, or you can have someone trying to kind of extract the poetry and the rhythm and the metre of the language and trying to kind of grasp the essence of what's there. And that can often be very beautiful, and it doesn't necessarily have to be done in a contemporary Indian language. It can be done in a more archaic form of Bengali poetry, for example, which people would probably need translating anyway. So from that point of view, it has that similar relationship that Shakespeare's original text does to kids in the classroom in England. So it is very interesting. And of course, when you see it done in like Baz Luhrmann's Romeo and Juliet, that spoke to a whole new audience because it was in their language. And part of the Globe to Globe was the hip-hop language. And that was considered one of the languages because it, spoke to its own audience. So yeah, it definitely does have great relevance.
And I think what's really fascinating, just to follow on from that, is the way in which that process of adaptation, can be much freer in other parts of the world and other languages. In Britain, I think there's still, particularly on stage, a very text-based sense. I mean, not just with Shakespeare, with other drama as well, but particularly in Shakespeare, the text is a kind of holy text, and you can't tamper with it. All you can do is cut it, perhaps, but you certainly wouldn't be able to add to it. You wouldn't be able to change it. People would write sort of angry letters to the Daily Telegraph if you started doing that. Whereas I think in somewhere like India, perhaps there's just more freedom in that because the placing is different, the geography is different, and the way that people respond to these things is different. And that, I think, is fascinating.
Right. And I just wanted to say that, I think Indian students, many of them may be under the misapprehension that somehow Shakespeare is in the blood of British kids. They just have to pick up a copy of Shakespeare, like that wonderful extract that you quoted from Mansfield Park this morning, and they'll understand him. But it's actually not the case.
No, it's not true at all. And, I remember being in a classroom with Julius Caesar, which the world's most unimaginative teacher had us read out different sections. I mean, I couldn't even pronounce Casca or didn't know who Cassius was. I mean, all of these things. So, yeah, there is a real distancing sometimes from the text. I think what's really enlivening about the conversations that have happened here in the last few days is just seeing how many different shapes that Shakespeare can be in, but also how different these access points can be in. And in fact, I found it really sort of it's been so enjoyable meeting people who have such a kind of passionate connection with Shakespeare. And sometimes in the UK, I suppose because we slightly take Shakespeare for granted, and also because we have to do him in school, there's a sort of sense of like, oh, Shakespeare again.
Yes. Well, you have to remember that we've been learning Shakespeare for even longer than you have. When kids in England have been studying Greek and Latin, kids in Bengal at least have been studying Shakespeare, have been studying English literature. Just one little point about language. I think the other language, and one of the other delegates at the seminar spoke of this, is things like, the physical language, the body language, the choreography. And often the folk idioms in India lend themselves extremely well to Shakespeare. We saw this happening in Twelfth Night, we saw it happening in Bagro Basant Hai and in Kamdev Ka Sapna Basant Ritu Ka Apna, which is Habib Tanveer's wonderful adaptation. Preeti, would you like to comment on that?
Well, I think that is very interesting, and I think that there are specific things that one can see as correlating very much. Like there's a humour of buffoonery, which I think exists very much in Indian cinema. It exists very much in sort of the way Indians tell jokes to each other, the way that one character in a society might be the butt of all jokes, and that exists very much in Shakespeare as well. And rather less comfortably, it's often done on class terms, or it's often done on sort of linguistic terms if someone doesn't speak a language or doesn't speak English very well. So when those adaptations get done, you might have a Malvolio character, for example, we were talking about Twelfth Night, who is interpreted as not being able to speak very good English, but thinking that he can. And that's something that in the Indian context would speak very much.
So friends, we come to the end of our 10-hour MOOC, The Renaissance and Shakespeare. We began this MOOC by talking about the intellectual currents in the Renaissance in Europe, about the philosophy, the politics, the visual arts, and the science of the Renaissance, as well as the position of women in the Renaissance. We talked about how the Renaissance moved from Italy to England. We then talked about the reign of Queen Elizabeth I, who was on the throne when Shakespeare was writing. We gave you information about Shakespeare's life and times. We then went on to give you detailed information about two of his tragedies, Othello and Macbeth, as well as two of his comedies, Twelfth Night and A Midsummer Night's Dream. We also gave you information about Shakespeare's history plays as well as the romances or the last plays of Shakespeare. We have in this MOOC performances by students of two scenes from two plays, A Midsummer Night's Dream, that is a multilingual performance, as well as a scene, the trial scene from The Merchant of Venice. These performances have been followed by panel discussions in which the students who participated in the performances talked about how the act of performance changes the way we look at the Shakespeare text. We also have a lecture on Shakespeare adaptations on the Indian stage, and the MOOC concludes with conversations with two international experts on global Shakespeare. So as you will see in this MOOC, we talk not just about Shakespeare the literary icon or about his plays as literary texts, but since they are plays, we also talk about performance. We talk about praxis, the practice of Shakespeare. We do hope that you have enjoyed this MOOC and gained a great deal from it. Thank you.